Welcome to Be Bold America. Be Bold America is a live, bi-weekly talk show for those who are motivated to step out with the actions necessary to begin reuniting this country and saving our democracy. What do I mean by step out? I mean to step out of your normal routine and to take action on something meaningful to you, that you will begin reuniting this country and saving our American democracy. Although it is a little scary considering the antagonistic climate in our country right now, I've decided to step out and produce a community radio program to discover ideas, methods, and strategies that you and I can adopt in our daily lives. I, for one, have had enough of the acrimony and the demonization that's taken hold of our country. I have witnessed our democracy slowly seep away. I know, as I'm sure you do too, that we weren't always this divided. Democracy is messy. Democracy requires debate, and democracy requires a give and take. But the intentional fostering and perpetuation of outright malicious hatred and fear has achieved, in my view, an intolerable level. No democracy can survive such powerfully destructive forces. And that's our challenge, how to recapture our democracy that so many have sacrificed to give us, many even with their lives, when there are numerous manipulative and powerful and selfish forces that don't want the United States to be a democracy any longer. In a book I wrote on the subject, I called them PRIFs, short for political, religious, industry, and that includes corporations, and ideological forces. And in the weeks ahead, we will be discussing these well-designed, well-funded forces, the agenda of which has nothing to do with preserving democracy, but all about tearing it apart. What I hope makes Be Bold America different talk show is the addition of an organization development tool. I've also had enough of discussing issues ad infinitum without concrete ideas of what we can do about this issue discussed. With this in mind, I will be asking experts what you and I can keep doing, stop doing, and start doing to be a bold citizen in our efforts to reunite this country. In addition to the Keep, Stop, Start action items, I will also be opening up my Be Bold toolbox and share an idea or concept that may help you in your pursuit of happiness. Given the challenges ahead that can rightfully be overwhelming, we will need to be our own superheroes, individually and collectively, becoming super citizens who are fearless, daring, and bold. Our future depends on it. So I invite you to join me in an adventure in democracy and social transition, to become a transition person that will participate, that will step out, and together attempt to reunite ourselves, maybe just enough to save our democracy. To begin that social transition, the topic for today is, why are we so angry? It's my goal in discussing this topic that it sparks your thinking about the role anger and outrage plays in your life. My goal for you is that at the end of this program, you'll be operating from constructive anger and constructive outrage. Because if you're not outraged at what is happening today, then you haven't been paying attention. This topic idea came from reading a recent article. The Atlantic magazine had an article on Why Are We So Angry, written by Charles Duhigg. He talked about why, when anger is appropriate, like getting angry and getting constructive, and about righteous anger and anger merchants. Now, anger merchants are out there making money off of your anger. We've been an angry country, an angry nation. We were born out of a revolution. We've been on battlefields, and we fight in the battle ballot box. But today, it's more extreme. To help me discuss the energizing topic of anger, I've invited a friend to join me in the studio. My guest today is Dr. Richard Nolthenius, who is chair of the astronomy department at Cabrillo College here in the Monterey Bay. After his graduate work at Stanford University and UCLA, Rick received a PhD in astronomy and astrophysics. His research credits range from black holes, chaos theory, dark matter, thermodynamics and stellar, aerospace, and human civilization systems, and, lately, in climate science. where he intimately encountered the emotional aspects we're going to discuss tonight. He's given numerous talks in the Santa Cruz area on climate change and the political, economic, and policy aspects we are facing. Today, we're going to bring him out of the stars to have a down-to-earth discussion on anger. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Jill, and very welcome that you invited me. And I have been out of the stars, unfortunately, for about 10 years now. It's been quite a come down. Astronomers are such wonderful people, and you really don't have too much in the way of emotional issues going on when you're dealing with astronomers. But boy, climate science is so much the opposite.
Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot to answer the constellation of reasons why we're so angry, but I know you've done a lot of thought on this subject as well.
Yes, initially I would say I went through quite a period of personal growth back in the early 1980s when I was in grad school at UCLA, and learned quite a bit. However, I've had to refocus quite a bit in the last 10 years because of the way that I got into climate science and of course trying to do something educational about it, realizing that climate science is far more than science. It's everything. It encompasses so much of our civilization and how it works that there's no way you're going to solve climate science without going far beyond the science. We're not going to techno-fix our way out of it. It's a civilization issue right down to the core. So yeah, I've had to come up to speed quite a bit on the nature of emotions and anger especially, and so I hope I can add something to the discussion.
Well, one thing you talked to me about was that nonviolence doesn't mean non-anger. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, there's, I sense, especially in this wonderful town of Santa Cruz, a certain cohort of people who are really not very friendly with their anger. They tend to think that it's some kind of a pathology and they need to stamp it out of themselves. And that is really counterproductive, and it's just wrong. I mean, emotions were given to us by nature. They're a signal, an instantaneous summing up of what is for me and what is against me. And anger, the symptom, or rather the signal that nature's trying to give you with anger is my values are threatened. I need to up my energy, I need to up my awareness, and I need to defend those values. And that's a valuable thing. Without anger in the proper moment, you're not going to energize yourselves and defend yourself, defend your values, defend your family, defend whatever it is that's really important to you. So what we need to do with anger is, first of all, we need to pause, look at it and say, okay, I'm angry. What is it I'm angry about?
And anger festers.
Yeah, the problem, well, this gets back to the first point, and that is if you don't make friends with your feelings, all of them, including the bad ones like anger, the unpleasant ones like anger, they're just going to stick. So if you really want to get past anger, what you need to do is listen to it and then address it. So if somebody is making you angry, then what you need to do is confront them. That doesn't mean to rant, it doesn't mean to wallow in it, and this is true of any emotions. It means to say, what is it? What values do I have that are being threatened? And then go about communicating as clearly as you can with the source of that anger, rather the source of that threat, how to deal with the threat. And if you've done that from a place of healthy self-assertiveness, the anger will tend to go away.
So the question is how to communicate it.
Right. Yes. We don't tend to educate people on how to do that, and often we end up having to go hire a specialist somewhere to teach us those things. You'd like to think that all parents would help their children understand this, but unfortunately it's still not as common as it should be. So we end up being dysfunctional from the start and often all the way through our lives.
So one of the points that was made in the Atlantic article was righteous anger.
Yes, well, there's certainly a healthy cause for being angry today. You look at the political situation, you look at the people in power, and you look at the corporations who have been instrumental in empowering those people, and there's every reason to be angry. So I certainly wouldn't want to think that people need to say, oh, I'm feeling angry. I shouldn't feel angry. I shouldn't be angry at these, conservatives or whoever. I should love them. I should love them all. I should be more like the Bible says, and so forth. And it's just so unrealistic. It's unrealistic, and it's also unhelpful, because all that does is it keeps you lost in the cycle. It keeps you denying what it is that is actually real. If you want to make progress, you have to start from reality, and the reality is you're angry, and you're angry for a very good reason.
So I've heard that phrase several times, that Republicans bring a knife and Democrats bring a pillow to fight.
Oh. Yeah, this was a quote given to Michael Moore recently, and it was from the Breitbart. I can't remember his name. Anyway, rather odious character, I think. And he said, the reason we're winning and you guys are losing is because we go for the headshot, and you guys are having pillow fights. And there's a lot of truth to what he's saying there. Doesn't mean we should go for headshots, but it does mean we should stand up for our values with a lot more force than we're doing.
Well, to explore righteous anger a little bit more, there seems to be an emotional resonance that needs to be created to get attached to a cause. To get involved in a cause like saving democracy or seeing what you can do to reunite this country, you have to feel connected somehow.
Well, what anger ultimately is, underneath the anger, is fear. You're afraid that somebody is threatening your values and you might not be able to stop them. And the more powerless you feel, then the more anger you're going to feel. And the solution to that is to gain some power. And the first step in that is to gain awareness and gain consciousness. So when you begin feeling these negative emotions, the first thing you should be thinking to do is to up your awareness, up your consciousness. Only in actually being conscious of what you're doing are you going to be able to solve things. There's this famous quote from Carl Jung, the 20th century psychologist, which is that if we deny who we... Oh, shoot. I need the quote in front of me. I'm sorry.
Sure,
I do
no
have
problem.
it here.
Yeah. I want to get it right.
Yeah, I want to get it right, yes. Too many pages of... Well, it was a quote that started with, if we do not stay conscious, if we don't make the unconscious conscious, then it will rule us. And we will call it fate. And I thought that really hit the mark, because there are so many people who feel fatalistic and so many people who feel out of control in their lives, but what they're doing is they're denying where they're starting from. They're denying their feelings. They only want to feel the happy things, and they will not let themselves go in and go through the negative emotions, including anger.
Just to talk about something that makes me angry, and being an example of it, in the righteous anger, trying to turn my anger into constructive outrage. And that is income inequality, because recently Oxfam just gave a report, released a report, that just 26 people, most of them Americans, 26 people in this world own $1.4 trillion, which is equal to 3.8 billion people. And so 26 people have taken $1.4 trillion out of our economy, and they're making they're getting richer every day by $2.5 billion. What I like to explain to people is, because we often throw the word billion out so easily, that $1 billion is 1,000 million dollars. So if you've got $2 billion, that's
$2,000 million.
$2,000 million.
Yeah,
So we didn't have billionaires, 15 years ago? I think our first billionaire was made. So this is really a new...
it's been skyrocketing. So ever since the Reagan years, the income inequality has just skyrocketed.
Grown and grown, and it's just been exponential, I think, in the last 10, 15 years. So you take a look at 26 people. We've got Jeff Bezos is number one, and then I think Bill Gates was next, and then Warren Buffett, and if I remember correctly, it was then Mark Zuckerberg. Many of them were in this country. So what happens, it seems to me, and what I get angry about, is that then because they have this money, they want to have the government run the democracy, which then becomes an oligarchy. So my point about saving our democracy is there are a lot of pressures of people that want to be in charge. They don't want people to vote. They don't want us to have much power because they want to be in charge of our government. So we each need to start thinking about what type of country do we want to live in. Do we want to live in an oligarchy where just a few people make our decisions and really democracy's a facade? Because I believe right now democracy's a facade. We have the appearance of a Congress, but
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
The pathology is that people who don't have a genuine self-esteem, genuine respect for themselves, which is only earned by a policy of honesty and integrity and following the best values that your consciousness can give you. If you don't have that, nature requires us to value who we are. And if we don't have it legitimately, then we will feel compelled to fake it. And that can come easily in this country through just amassing more money. You know, making your yacht 5 feet longer than Larry Ellison's, and then he'll perhaps feel compelled to get a new yacht and stick another 5 feet on the end of his.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems so transparently ridiculous, and yet it's not felt that way for these people. So there's no amount of money that will ever be enough. You can't fill a hole that is caused through a lack of genuine self-respect by just filling it with money.
So there has to be a counteracting force to that because it just would continue and continue and continue.
Right.
And that's when the ideas that are now being floated by ACO or AOC, Alexandria Ortiz,
Yeah.
Cortez. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's just say
AOC.
AOC,
Yeah, that's good
or
enough.
Elizabeth Warren. Talking about taxing the 70%, or what was it for AOC, 70% over 10 million? Or Elizabeth Warren's talking about a wealth tax, people that, what they own, their assets. And we start taking a look at, in Ronald Reagan's time, the wealth tax was something like 91%.
Yeah, just before the Reagan years,
Yeah.
it was quite high.
It was quite high. So
and most of the income growth that happened back in those years was going to the middle class.
Yes, and made this powerful, large, healthy, vibrant middle class, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And built a lot of our infrastructure that's decaying right now. But there's been in my view, a velvet coup over the last 40 years. There's been a process, an intentional process, to take away the laws that kept them at bay, like the Glass-Steagall Act, and
Right.
so.
Right. There's this great study which I know you're very much aware of, and is probably worth quoting here. And this is a study by Gillens and Page,
Oh, yeah.
Princeton and Northwestern researchers who studied 20 years, nearly 2,000 bills introduced to Congress and to the president for signing, and found that the correlation between the desirability of these bills and the average voter, their desires, was zero. There was absolutely zero correlation between what the average voter wanted and what laws were actually enacted. But the correlation was near perfect, so a perfect correlation function would be 1.0, and the correlation was 0.78 for the economic elites.
So the people, when the people got what they wanted, is when the economic elites agreed.
Yeah, so they actually they made sure that their statistics were measuring influence. So this is one of the criticisms people have made of that study, which is bogus, really, because what they were really trying to do is measure how influential are people, average voters and economic elites. And of course there's going to be some bills that both the economic elites and the average people want. So you have to correct for that. So the numbers I gave, the numbers they quote and are out there, are showing the independent influence. And so the result still stands. There is zero correlation between what the average voter wants and the bills that are actually enacted. And this goes back to the Clinton years. This goes back well before the Trump years. So this is an ongoing thing. This has been going on for our lives. And nothing's really changed. So whatever it is that we're doing, it's clearly not working.
Interestingly enough, though, they keep wanting to steal our vote. So I think the one thing they're afraid of is our vote, because there's so many methods of how to suppress it. Well, let's remind people we're on KSQD 90.7 FM, your ink spot on the dial, Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay. And I am Jill Cody, your host, and I'm speaking with Rick Nolthenius. And also, I wanted to promote one of the wonderful talk shows that I've listened to, and a mentor of mine. KQSD is the new squid on the airwaves and live talk, local talk and music, plus shows like Tom Hartman, who's been a mentor in my mind. Amy Goodman, Democracy Now! And Counterspin, your favorites, plus some new squids on the block at 90.7 FM. To support this effort, make a donation when you check us out at ksqd.org. And I also want to take a minute too and really acknowledge the people that built this community station. It has been 2.5 years of a lot of hard work of many volunteers, and it's a dream come true. We had a ribbon cutting on Friday, and there were tears in many people's eyes at the accomplishment of creating this community station. So for those of you that are able to donate, please consider donating to KSQD. There's a donation button right on the website, and you can also listen on the computer because they're streaming live. Okay, well, back to anger, because another component of that article were anger merchants, people that make money off of us being angry.
Right. And that's an economic problem as much as anything else, because they make money by keeping people in this perpetual state of anger. So they don't particularly want to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
The more angry people are, the more they tend to cling to their tribe and cling to their tribal media outlets. And that's just money in the bank for people like Rupert Murdoch and others.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important for us, myself included, when I get angry about something, is to look, is it being stoked somehow? Is somebody lighting a fire about that anger? Because it is a manipulation tool, and the thing is it works.
Yeah.
So we have to be responsible for our anger and our fear. We need to be responsible on knowing when it's being stoked, tapped. But because it works, it gets eyeballs on the TV screen, or listeners on the radio, or money in the bank.
Yeah, what you need to do is to take the legitimate anger that people like you and I and many people in this community feel, which is a threat to the values of democracy and the threat to the values of the health of our planet going into the future, and then try and identify what can we do about it. I think there's very ineffective ways to try and do something about it, and those, unfortunately, are what mostly I see around me. So trying to short-circuit the fact that you are angry, and try and short-circuit the anger in the people that you're dealing with. Love bombing, just it's such a notion out of the New Age, and it just really is kind of naive. The only way anger is going to be dissipated is you have to deal with what are the values being threatened. So now you might think, well, can we talk with let's say the certain right-wing elements who are very afraid? Only to a limited degree. It turns out the more you try and reason with them, the studies show that, at least in climate science, where I'm much more familiar, the more you try and reason with them, actually the more they dig in their heels, and the more militant they get on the wrong side of the science of that issue. So trying to reason with them actually is not the way to go. You could try to talk with them and say, well, what is it exactly you're afraid of? I think what you'd find is that they're afraid that the world of their youth, the 1950s all-white, Opie Cunningham kind of world is fast disappearing, and they see it being overrun by all these immigrants, and there's some truth to that. But of course, most of the immigrants that come here are people who've got enough gumption and talent and desire to live in a better place, that they're actually on average better people. So they're not worse people, they're better people. Now getting them to the point where you could actually have them appreciate that, boy, how would you do that? I was thinking about that the other day. Maybe we could have some sort of a required aspect of being a voter, that you go down and you spend a day or 2 days down in, in Chinatown or in Little Havana, or whatever places that you might be able to identify locally in certain neighborhoods, and say, and actually talk with these people and find out that they're not demons. They're actually pretty great people, and they may not speak English like you, but they're great people just the same. We're all very similar underneath, and that might diffuse them. I don't know. I think would be a lot of resistance to even trying to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I see the rage. I see where it comes from. I don't see any really easy solutions. I think the best that we might be able to do is instead to try and go around such people rather than try to go through them. And I see too much effort being spent on trying to go through them, trying to turn the right wing into better people. And I think they're only going to be better people when they decide that they want to. And you're not going to convince them. You're not, especially if you're a liberal, you're not going to convince them. I mean, as soon as they identify, some liberal's trying to change my mind, boy, I think your cause is instantly lost. I don't even waste your time. They'll go there when they're ready, and we instead need to take back control of our government.
You're reminding me of something that I often think to myself when I hear, when I see a T-shirt such as a dead Democrat's better than a dead Russian, or something like that. There was a T-shirt that I saw on TV, and I thought, the demonization of Democrats or liberals or progressive, that demonization, and I thought, I'm not anybody's enemy. It's really offensive to me to be demonized like that, because I am not anybody's enemy. And I have a very good experience or example. I was flying home from actually training with Al Gore in Nashville, and I sat next to a gentleman who had on his lap Bill O'Reilly's book. I think it was titled I'm Watching Out for You, or something like that. And I struck up a conversation, and I talked to him, and I found out about him, and he was retired from Boeing, okay? And then it was just after the 2010 census. So he'd been a census taker, and he was retired and on Social Security. And yet he was talking about how the Democrats were so bad, and that we needed to privatize Social Security, and we need to do this and that. I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself, well, Boeing gets a lot of federal government contracts. His Social Security is being paid by the taxpayers that we pay into it, and it's held in trust by the government. The census job was paid by taxpayers, and it just seemed to me that the government was kind of looking out for him pretty well too. But yet here he is with this book, with the whole talking points about how bad Democrats were. And
well, it's interesting. It's interesting because I'm thinking of the fossil fuel industry and how they're wanting to free government from free the shackles of government off of private industry, and yet the subsidies that they get amount to 6% of global gross domestic product.
Wow, 6% of our GDP.
6%. Now,
are
about half of that.
subsidies to the fossil fuel.
Yes, about half of that is environmental costs that they're just not paying. But I think that's probably underestimated because that dates back before we really understood how bad climate science and climate change is going to be. But about half that, 3%, is cash and tax breaks and various forms of money. 3% of gross domestic product. I mean, if we spent that amount of money on actually trying to address climate change, we could make some big progress. So they're all for free enterprise as long as they're getting their subsidies.
And that's an interesting thing too, because I think about I don't have a problem with capitalism, but it needs some rules to the game. I mean, we wouldn't play baseball without rules.
Yeah.
We don't play football without rules.
Well, this is
and
another.
Regulations are rules, and most of them are to protect people,
Yeah.
and yet, the idea of getting rid of regulations, just get rid of them and rid of them. Who benefits from that?
Yeah. Yeah, this is another false demonization against people who would advocate for sane rules, and that is that we're all communists. We're socialists. We're going to drag the the country down to everybody just being dirt poor. And of course, in communist countries, that has been the history. But what that is just the most extreme form of inequality, because you have the billionaires who actually run the country, tiny fraction of them, the Putins and so forth, and then you have the vast majority of people who are dirt poor. Now, it's not quite that bad in this country, but it's heading there, and it can get there by fascism or it can get there by communism. And, both of those are the same bad coin, both sides of the same bad coin. And of course, we're not advocating that.
Well, and I think it's important to look behind the anger message, the anger merchants out there with their anger message, to look behind and ask myself too, that who benefits from this? Who benefits from this anger?
Yeah.
And if you're a less scrupulous person, or you're making millions of dollars off of an anger formula on the radio or television, then they're not going to change. It needs the public, the listening and watching public needs to change because it's in their benefit.
Yeah. Though you'd like to think that at some point they would just get tired of being angry. It can be exhausting. That there is a certain amount of biological energy that has to be invested in getting stoked.
Yeah, it's an emotional virus, though. I think it just adds, especially if you see the paychecks coming in, and this is working for you.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll have a heart attack at 55. I don't know. This is that anger, and that's something I wanted to talk about too. We're an angry society. I did want to talk, and where that came from was, type A personality. There are many type A personalities in our country when we're living in a type A society. So, what is type A? Type A, type B personality types. Dr. Meyer Friedman was a cardiologist many years ago who actually coined the phrase, trying to divide two groups of people up. And he just called one type A, and now it's become an iconic kind of phrase, and the other being type B. And how he discovered the personality type that leads to heart attacks, that leads to actually, self-destruction in many ways, was because of an upholsterer. Somebody came in and replace the upholstery on the chairs in his waiting room. And the upholsterer said to him, "What do you do here? Who are these people?" I said, "I have never seen the fronts of the upholstered chairs worn off so much." And Dr. Friedman started watching that and watching the bouncing knees, and the movement that type A's, because the type A's have elevated norepinephrine, hormone, I guess it is, elevated in their body, and it makes them move more and bounce the knee more. And so he started taking a look at this, and really after many years of research and NIH funding, he realized that there were personality types that could hurt and cause heart attacks. So type A personality, how I have sort of distilled it down, it's called free-floating hostility plus time urgency equals self-destruction. And free-floating hostility is another way to say free-floating anger. You just have anger in you all the time, and it's in you. It's not in the situation or the job, or it's just you carry it with you, and then it just pops out.
Oh, but that anger is going to stay in you unless you actually confront it.
Yes.
And you talk about the threat that is at the base of that
Yes.
anger. And if you don't, then it sticks with you. I don't know if I'd call it a personality type so much as a behavior, a habit.
It is a behavior. It's definitely a
you
behavior.
You don't have to stay type A. That's one thing I don't like about that classification is it classifies people in a way that that they begin to feel, well, that's just me. I'm just a type A, or I'm just a type B.
Very good point.
And that's
No,
not
and
true.
then I give up. That's just who I am. And
Right.
no, you can definitely.
The part of the culture of irresponsibility,
Exactly.
unfortunately, that's also
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
where we live, is we don't want to just take responsibility for, hey, that's actually not serving me. Maybe I could change. How would I do that?
And
Who would I talk
yeah.
to figure out how I could maybe behave differently? And then you might
Yeah.
make progress.
And your point about the threat, I think too, is really taking a look, is there really a threat? Am I angry about something and it's
there
not
is.
really maybe there isn't. But you've been maybe manipulated and stoked for that, again, the anger merchant, but is it really a threat? And so, one
Well, there
thing,
could be.
Yeah,
I mean,
could be.
again,
Of course
I'm
there
working
could be.
so much in climate science, and yeah, there's
Well,
a huge
that's
threat.
a threat.
There's a
Yeah,
huge threat.
I'm just thinking
Yeah.
in general and looking at anger. Maybe one example, of course, is what's happening at our border. We're all focused on the border and the south border. And yet it's not a threat to there are not tanks it's called an invasion.
Yeah, no,
And
and of
they're
course
not
the
tanks at
data
our
shows there's
border.
actually less border crossings, and
Well,
there's,
it's the lowest since 1971.
yeah.
And of course, it's the definition between immigration and refugees. Refugees are people leaving a dangerous environment, a dangerous country, trying to find refuge, and immigration is a different category. So here's people are feeling threatened at the border, and yet there are no tanks there. There isn't any artillery. There aren't troops at our border, and yet they think many people feel we're being invaded. When they're refugees coming from dangerous countries that we may have in previous years done some destabilizing ourselves in those countries, and and there's no threat to us at all. It's been a net negative immigration. So that's what I was thinking about when I was saying it may not be a threat at all. So that's a situation
Well,
where we
this
can
is
be very
how
angry about
demagogues
it.
stay in power. Is they manufacture threats so that
Mm-hmm.
it's a time-honored tradition for 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like your popularity is dropping, go start a war.
That's right. That's right.
And so that Trump has learned that, and that's where we're at.
Well, I want to remind people that we're on KSQD 90.7 FM Santa Cruz, your ink spot on the dial. And this is Jill Cody, your host, and I'm speaking with Rick Nolthenius, professor at Cabrillo College. And also, KSQD is a community radio. Do you own a business? You can become a pioneer at KSQD sponsor or KSQD sponsor. Listeners in Santa Cruz and Monterey counties will know you support local community radio, KSQD 90.7 FM, and will support your business. Write to info@ksqd.org, and that's info@ksqd.org. We're looking for sponsors.
I just wanted to clarify myself. My name's pronounced
Nolthenius.
Nolthenius. There's an L there, yeah. And again, I teach astronomy. I teach all the astronomy courses at Cabrillo College, and
And climate.
Yes, and so really my passion for the last 10 years has been teaching a class called Planetary Climate Science, which, while it does deal with the climate of other planets and climate principles in general, it really spends as much time as possible, most of the class, frankly, in Earth climate and Earth climate change, going also into policy and the climate science of the future, and exactly what we face in terms of needing to deal with it in geoengineering and technological solutions of various kinds. So it's a very complete class, and so I hope that some people might want to take advantage of that. And I offer it every semester, and yeah, I hope to see you.
And they can go up to the Cabrillo College website to sign up.
Yeah, it's Astro 7, Planetary Climate Science, yeah. Tuesday afternoons is when I offer it.
Well, do you have any other thoughts on anger that we haven't explored, Rick?
I would say that it's not particularly productive to try and change in some deep personal way the people out there who are behind this because it's not effective. I would say instead that what we need to do is take our healthy anger and channel it into actions which will show that we're not going to take this anymore. So I've been advocating in my climate class for quite some time. The prime thing to be doing is to go to Washington, D.C. with enough people that you cannot jail us all and you cannot lock us up, and to basically shut down the town with, though, a very specific set of legislative agendas which will address climate science, address climate change. And we only need maybe 100,000 people. Now, that sounds like a lot, but it's only, 0.3% of America.
Of 330 million.
And there's enough published climate science, especially in the last 10 years, that shows that we're really facing existential threat. And if we don't solve climate change, all these other problems, they don't matter, okay? They'll sink to insignificance. So we're heading towards a state where demagogues are going to be rising, fear is going to be stoked even more. I really see us going in a direction that we don't like in an amplified way, and a lot of that's going to be stoked by just the physics of climate change.
Yeah, not if I can help it.
Yeah. No, well, you're one of the good warriors, so we're hoping.
You are reminding me, though, of something, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Tipping Point. You take a bell curve, and the bell curve, you have your people that are out in the leading edge, and then there are those that are at the other end of the bell curve. But really, the people that you need to inspire and motivate and educate are the ones that are in the middle, and pull them over to action, pull them over to participating.
Right, education's the key, and so we need to get this word out.
Saying that I really need to do something. I can't sit on the sidelines anymore.
Exactly,
we have a lot of people on the sidelines.
Well, you need to see examples of people who are living their values and doing so in a way that makes you look and say, wow. Like this young Swedish girl lately,
Yes.
Greta Thunberg.
13?
15,
15.
yeah. Incredibly inspiring because she's not some great orator with all of these rhetorical skills. She just speaks from her heart, straight truth. And I think we need a lot more of that.
We need a lot more of straight truth.
Yeah, just straight truth, so that people don't feel manipulated. This is the problem, is when you're trying to stoke anger, or you're trying to stoke love, or you're trying to stoke anything. Frankly, the first thing people recognize is they're trying to be manipulated. And they put their hand on their wallet and they say, I don't know if I want to go, what is this person trying to sell me?
I think it's the first thing I think about, and I think it's the first thing many people think about, but yet there are a lot of entities out there, talk shows and TV and other things, the anger merchants,
right,
that are doing just that and making millions. And I guess for them, it's not the first thing to realize they're being manipulated, but that's one reason why I wanted to cover this topic that was in the Atlantic article, was that why are we so angry? And for each one of us to take a look at our anger and who's making us angry, and is it somebody of character? Are they
well, of course,
benefiting?
there's many reasons, and there are people like you and me who are angry for quite legitimate reasons, but we're not controlled by it. We're not ruled by it. And then there's the people that you're wanting to change their minds of. They are controlled by the people who are running the country now, and that's the problem.
And then, I wanted to move on to our keep, start, stops from what we listened to today. One thing that I heard you talk about was to, and maybe for people to start looking for the fear behind their anger.
Right. So you're not going to cause anger to go away. So what you need to do, if you want the anger to follow its natural course, there is a natural course for emotions, and that is for you to experience them, name them, use the words that are most to the point about what exactly it is that's going on, and then you'll find that it will slowly let go. So it's a message that's being delivered, and once the message has realized that it has been delivered, then it tends to recede. And the message of anger is that you have important values that are being threatened. So you have to take that next step and say, okay, what values do I have that are being threatened? So if you're a very conservative person, you might get to a point and realize, actually these immigrants here, they're not such bad people. And actually there's a lot of ways in which the country has gotten better, and in fact there was a heck of a lot of anger and racism and lynchings and whatnot back when I was a kid, come to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure I want to go back to that. And begin to realize that, maybe there's nothing quite so much to be afraid of objectively.
You also talked about starting to up your consciousness. I think that's what...
Yeah, that's a general solution
Yep.
to basically any emotional
Yep.
issue is
Yep.
be aware, be awake and aware.
Well, also one thing that I wanted to share with people is another, in my Be Bold toolbox, is something called the Energies Dimension. And I wrote a blog on this, and when the website, my webpage is up and running on KSQD, it will be there. And, I took a training with Wilfred Jarvis, who was an Australian social behaviorist. And he divided our human energies into constructive and creative ones, and destructive and disruptive ones. And I found that through the years, this helps people triage the emotions that they're feeling. And if they feel that he called it living in the red, living in the black, and he took a checkbook concept. And if you're in the red with your checkbook, that's not a good thing. If you're in the black, that's a very good thing with your checkbook. So finding out that if you're red and angry and it's creating anxiety and you're not sleeping at night, that's not so good. That's hurting your health. But to turn that around, as we've been talking today about anger, and say, okay, how can I make it constructive? How can I be active in some organization maybe? And I looked up 3 that are really trying to channel constructive anger. One is the One America movement. They're trying to build bridges and solve problems and bring people together across racial and religious and political lines. And another is the Coffee Party. The Coffee Party has a pledge, and we pledge to conduct ourselves in a civil, honest, and respectful way with people that we disagree with. And then there was also Civility First. Civility First was another one that has a pledge about, their movement is a grassroots movement promoting courteous public and online dialogue. We are a group of citizens from across the political spectrum concerned about normalization of uncivil discourse. And their pledge talks about value, honesty, and goodwill while striving to solve problems. And so you might want to listen. You might want to check out these organizations and their websites and take a look at their pledges, because there are 3 right there that are trying to channel our anger more constructively and reunite this country. And I think that that just wraps up our show for today. I wanted to thank you, Rick, so much for spending time
Well,
here.
thank you for having me be your inaugural guest.
And this is KSQD 90.7 FM, Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay. Thank you very much.